The city was quiet except for the steady rhythm of rain against the pavement. Streetlights shimmered through the downpour, painting golden reflections across puddles. Beneath one of those lights sat Haley, her hair drenched, mascara running, clutching her knees as if holding herself together was all she could do. The world around her moved on, cars hissing by, strangers hurrying under umbrellas. But no one stopped. Not until he did. Liam had been driving home from another long day, another meeting, another deal closed, another evening that should have meant success but somehow felt empty. The rain was heavy, blurring the windshield when he noticed her. A girl sitting alone on a bench soaked to the bone, trembling. Something in him, something he didn't even know was still alive, told him to stop. He pulled over without thinking, parked by the curb, and stepped out into the rain. His jacket was no match for the storm, but it didn't matter. Each step toward her felt heavier, as if he was walking into someone else's story. "Hey," he said gently, his voice almost drowned by the rain. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. She didn't even look up. For a moment, he thought she hadn't heard him. But then she did. Her voice was soft, cracked, barely there. "Please, just go." Her words trembled like the raindrops on her hands. Liam hesitated, then took a careful step closer. "You shouldn't be out here like this," he said, kneeling slightly to meet her eye level. "You'll get sick," she laughed, a small, broken sound. Too late for that. He didn't know what she meant, but he saw something in her eyes, a storm that matched the one above them. He wanted to leave. He didn't owe her anything, but something about her felt familiar, that kind of pain you don't forget once you've lived through it yourself. "Do you need a ride?" he asked. "I'm not dangerous, just someone who can't walk away right now." Haley finally looked at him then. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling. She studied his face as if searching for the lie, but all she found was sincerity. "Why do you care?" she whispered. Liam didn't know how to answer. Maybe because he remembered nights like this when no one cared. Because sometimes, he said softly, a stranger caring is all it takes to keep you from giving up. For the first time, she didn't tell him to leave. Instead, she stared at the ground, silent. The rain softened, as if the storm itself was listening. Liam held out his hand. "Come on, let's get you somewhere dry." Haley hesitated, then finally placed her hand in his. It was cold, colder than he expected, but there was a pulse, a quiet reminder that she was still here. They walked toward his car, her steps slow, her clothes clinging to her. When he opened the passenger door, she froze. "I don't even know your name," she said. He smiled gently. "It's Liam, and you don't have to know anything else, not yet." Inside the car, warmth filled the air as he turned the heater on. Haley's hands trembled as she tried to wipe away the mascara streaks. "You must think I'm pathetic," she said softly. Liam shook his head. "No, I think you're human, and humans break sometimes." Her chest tightened at his words. No one had said something so kind in a long time. She turned her face toward the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. "I didn't think anyone would stop," she whispered. "People usually don't." Liam gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale. "Maybe they don't see what I see." They drove in silence for a while. The rain eased, turning into a drizzle. The city lights blurred past, reflections of their unspoken thoughts. Finally, Liam asked, "Is there somewhere I can take you?" Hayley hesitated, then said, "No, nowhere that feels like home anymore." He didn't press. Instead, he stopped by a small diner still open. "Come on," he said softly. "You look like you need something warm." She wanted to refuse, but her body betrayed her. She was shivering, hungry, exhausted. So she nodded, and they stepped inside. The diner smelled of coffee and rain-soaked clothes. The waitress glanced at them, but said nothing. They sat in a corner booth, quiet at first. Hayley wrapped her fingers around the mug Liam ordered for her. Steam curled upward, fogging her reflection in the window. Liam studied her face, not out of pity, but curiosity. She looked young but carried a heaviness in her eyes that didn't belong to youth. "Rough day?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She gave a humorless laugh. "Rough year." He nodded, understanding more than he let on. "I get that." She glanced up. "Do you? You look like someone who has it all figured out." He smiled faintly. "Looks can lie. I've been lost before, too." Her eyes softened. "So what made you stop for me?" she asked quietly. Liam thought for a moment. "Maybe I saw myself a few years ago, sitting on that bench." Hayley blinked, surprised. "What happened to you?" He hesitated. "Someone stopped for me, too." The rain outside slowed to a whisper. The world seemed to fade, leaving only them to strangers bound by invisible threads of hurt and hope. Hayley lowered her gaze. "I didn't think people like that existed anymore." Liam smiled gently. "They're rare, but they find you when you need them most." She stared at him, really seeing him now. His hair was still damp, his shirt clinging to him, yet his eyes held warmth, the kind that made her chest ache. "You talk like someone who's been through a lot," she murmured. He nodded slightly, enough to know that storms don't last forever. Her lips parted as if to reply, but no words came. Instead, tears filled her eyes again, not from pain this time, but something softer, something new. She quickly wiped them away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't even know why I'm crying." Liam's voice was calm, maybe because for the first time someone's listening. Silence lingered, but it wasn't heavy anymore. The rain outside had stopped completely, leaving only the faint hum of city life. For the first time that night, Hayley smiled, small, fragile, but real. "Thank you," she said. For stopping. Liam's expression softened. "I couldn't have done anything else." When they finally stepped back outside, the air was cool and clean. Puddles reflected the city lights like stars scattered across the street. Hayley looked up. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It always is," Liam said, "after the rain." Something about his words stayed with her, something she couldn't explain. As he drove her to a nearby motel, Haley glanced at him. "Do you ever wonder why certain people cross your path?" she asked softly. Liam smiled. "Every day, and tonight, I think I found my reason." Haley turned away, her heart beating faster. She didn't know this man, not really, but somehow she felt safe, seen. "Maybe you're just being kind," she said quietly. "Maybe," he replied, eyes still on the road. "Or maybe some meetings aren't accidents." They reached the motel. Haley hesitated before opening the door. "You've done enough," she said. "You don't have to worry about me anymore." Liam smiled faintly. "Who said I was worrying? Maybe I just care." She looked at him, unsure what to say. "Why me?" Liam's gaze softened. "Because sometimes helping someone else helps you too." Haley stepped out, her hair glistening under the streetlight. "Good night, Liam," she whispered. He nodded. "Good night, Haley, and take care of yourself, okay?" She turned and walked toward the lobby, her reflection fading in the wet pavement. Liam sat there for a moment, staring through the windshield. Something inside him felt different, lighter, alive. He didn't know why that night mattered so much, only that it did. Inside her room, Haley sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The mascara stains were still there, but her eyes looked different. She thought about his words, the warmth in his voice, the way he'd looked at her like she wasn't invisible. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone. She whispered to herself, "Maybe." Storms don't last forever. Outside, the rain began again, soft and steady. But this time, it sounded less like sorrow and more like renewal. And somewhere, sitting alone in his car, Liam smiled without knowing why, his heart echoing the same thought. Maybe that night wasn't a coincidence. Maybe it was the beginning of something neither of them expected. The morning light crept softly into Haley's motel room, warming the edges of the rumpled sheets. The storm had washed the city clean, but inside, her heart still felt fragile, like glass that had cracked but not shattered. She sat on the bed, staring at her reflection in the small mirror, wondering if last night had really happened or if it was just a dream brought on by exhaustion. The stranger, Liam. His name echoed in her thoughts like a song she didn't know the words to but couldn't forget. He'd stopped when no one else had. He'd cared without reason. That kind of kindness was rare, almost impossible. Haley exhaled slowly. Maybe it meant nothing, she whispered, but deep down she knew it did. She dressed in a clean sweater and jeans, tied her hair loosely, and stepped outside. The air still carried that post-rain chill, but sunlight was pushing through the clouds. She decided she needed to move, find something to do, something to remind her that she was still part of the world. She walked until she found a small cafe tucked between two buildings, its sign reading Harper's Books and Brews. A mix of coffee and old paper filled the air when she entered, a scent that felt like home. She ordered a cappuccino and settled near the window. For the first time in a long while, she opened her sketchbook. The pages were damp from the night before, edges curled, but the pencil still moved. She drew raindrops, reflections, shadows, until her hand paused and her pencil outlined a face, his face, Liam's. She almost laughed. "Really, Haley," she murmured, embarrassed at herself. But she couldn't erase it. Something about him had stayed. Across town, Liam sat in his office, half focused on spreadsheets and half on nothing at all. He'd told himself to forget her, to move on, that helping a stranger didn't mean anything deeper. But every time he blinked, he saw her sitting there, soaked, trembling, defiant, and something in him tightened. He hadn't felt that kind of pull in years, not since before his life had become all deadlines and expectations. He tried drowning the thoughts in work, but the silence of the room only made them louder. After an hour of pretending to care about numbers, he grabbed his coat and stepped out. Maybe a walk would help clear his mind. The streets shimmered with puddles, catching bits of sunlight. The city felt new, like it too had decided to start over. Liam wandered without direction, hands in his pockets, until he found himself near the bookstore cafe he'd never noticed before. Harper's Books and Brews. Something about it drew him in. Maybe the warm lights through the window, maybe the smell of coffee, maybe something unseen pulling at his chest. He stepped inside. Haley didn't notice him at first. She was lost in her sketchbook, head tilted, lips pressed together as she shaded the curve of a smile that didn't quite belong to her. Then she sensed it, that familiar, quiet energy. She looked up, and there he was. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Liam smiled, slow, surprised, real. "You again." Haley blinked, stunned, then let out a small, nervous laugh. "I swear I'm not following you." Liam grinned. "Could have fooled me. Maybe fate's just stubborn." The tension melted instantly. The air between them softened into something comfortable, almost intimate. "You look better today," he said gently, nodding toward her. She smiled shyly. "Yeah, dry hair does wonders." They both laughed. He motioned toward the empty chair across from her. "Mind if I join you?" She hesitated only for a second before nodding. He sat still, damp from the drizzle, the scent of rain lingering on him. Haley closed her sketchbook quickly, embarrassed, drawing something he asked. She shook her head. "Just doodling." He smiled knowingly. "Rain, because that's what you were doing when I found you," he said softly. "Facing your storm." Her throat tightened, not from sadness, but from how easily he seemed to understand her. "You talk like everything's poetry," she said quietly. Liam chuckled. "Maybe I've just lived enough to know there's meaning in everything, even the rain." Haley looked down, smiling faintly. "You really believe that?" "I have to," he said. "Otherwise, nights like yesterday would just be pain instead of purpose." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need filling. The world outside blurred, cars passing, raindrops clinging to glass, while something fragile but beautiful grew between them. Haley finally broke the quiet. "So, do you come here often?" He laughed softly. "First time, actually. Guess fate's got good taste." Her lips curved into a real smile. "Or maybe it just likes messing with us." Either way, he said, "I'm not complaining." The waitress brought refills, and they spent another hour talking about everything and nothing. Favorite movies, books, the kind of rain they liked best. It was easy, too easy, and for a girl who'd forgotten what ease felt like, it was magic. When she finally stood to leave, Liam's smile faltered slightly. "Leaving already?" Haley nodded. "Yeah, gotta figure some things out." He hesitated, then said, "Can I see you again?" She froze, surprised by the hope in his voice. "Maybe," she said softly. "If the rain decides to play matchmaker again." He smiled, watching her walk away. The doorbell chimed, and she was gone, but the warmth she'd left behind lingered.
The next few days passed like quiet waves. Not because she expected him, but because it made her feel close to something she couldn't explain. Sometimes she sketched. Sometimes she just watched the rain. And every time the bell above the door rang, her heart skipped, though she told herself she wasn't waiting. But on the fourth day, he gave in. Maybe he was just craving good coffee. Maybe not. Hair falling loose around her face. He didn't say a word. Haley looked up, startled, then smiled. "Guess so. Maybe I like this view. Funny," he said, sitting across from her. Electricity. Comfort. Familiarity. The kind you don't question because it feels right. They talked again, longer this time. About where she grew up, how he left his small town chasing success. How she lost herself trying to be everything for everyone until she had nothing left. He listened without interrupting, eyes soft, voice quiet. "You didn't lose yourself," he said finally. "You just forgot how strong you are." Her eyes glistened. No one had ever said that to her. "You make it sound easy," she murmured. "It's not," he said. She didn't realize she was crying until he reached across the table and gently brushed away a tear with his thumb. She froze at the touch, soft, careful, human. Haley pulled back first, cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry, don't be," he said softly, drumming against the glass. They both turned to watch it, smiling faintly at the sound. She saw not just the man who'd helped her, but someone who carried his own rain too. He hesitated, eyes drifting to the window. A life that looked perfect but felt empty. People who smiled but never saw me. Success that didn't mean anything anymore. Haley nodded slowly. "Sounds lonely." "It was," he said, meeting her eyes again. "Until I stopped in the rain that night." Something in her chest shifted, a quiet click, like two pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. They stayed there until the rain faded again. When it stopped, neither of them moved to leave. Might break whatever fragile magic held them together. "So are you," he said. That night, As Haley walked back to her motel, her steps felt lighter. She glanced up at the sky, clear now, stars winking faintly, and whispered, "Thank you, Liam." Walking home under the same sky, whispered the same words without knowing why. They were two souls stitched together by chance, or maybe by destiny's end. Neither could shake the feeling that something extraordinary was just beginning. Days turned into weeks, and what began as coincidence started to feel like routine. And somehow, it always did, right when she stopped looking. Liam walked in, raincoat half buttoned, smile soft and unsure. Every time he saw her, the air between them seemed to settle, like two familiar melodies finally playing in sync. They didn't plan it. They didn't have to. Their connection grew in small moments, laughter shared over coffee spills, long talks that wandered from dreams to fears, quiet silences that said everything words couldn't. Sometimes he'd bring her a book. Sometimes she'd show him her art. And in those shared exchanges, they built a world that felt safe. But even the safest worlds have cracks. Haley didn't know much about Liam beyond the fragments he chose to share, that he worked in business, that he'd once loved someone who left, that he didn't talk much about his past. She never pushed. Maybe because she had secrets too. One evening, after the cough closed, they walked together down the quiet streets. The lamps cast golden halos on the wet pavement, and the world felt slow. Haley kicked at a puddle playfully. "So, mysterious man," she teased. "Do you ever tell people what you actually do?" Liam smiled faintly. "Maybe I just like the mystery." "Or maybe," she said, glancing at him, "you're hiding something." He laughed, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Maybe I am." She didn't press, not because she didn't want to know, but because she sensed the pain beneath the words. Instead, she looped her arm through his and said softly, "When you're ready." That simple gesture, that trust, shook something in him. For years, Liam had been trapped in a life of glass walls and false smiles. The CEO of a major firm, respected, admired, but empty. He'd walked away from it all 2 months ago after a scandal that wasn't his fault but left his reputation bruised. The world saw him as powerful. Haley saw him as human. And he wasn't ready for her to see the rest. The more time they spent together, the harder it became to hide. One night, he took her to the old pier, wooden planks, glistening under the moonlight, waves whispering secrets below. Haley leaned against the railing, wind tangling her hair, eyes glowing softly in the dark. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It is," he said, but he wasn't looking at the view. When she turned, his gaze caught hers. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Then, without thinking, he brushed a strand of hair from her face. She didn't move. "Liam," she whispered. He stepped closer, voice barely audible. "You have this way of making everything feel like it matters again." Her heart pounded. "So do you." He leaned in, slow and uncertain, as though afraid the moment might vanish if he moved too fast. When their lips met, it wasn't fireworks, it was quiet, steady warmth. A promise whispered in the dark. They pulled apart only when the wind grew colder, both smiling shyly, both afraid to speak. "Guess we're past coffee now," she joked softly. He laughed. "Way past." But later that night, when Liam returned home, the warmth faded into guilt. On his desk lay the remnants of a life he hadn't told her about, of business letters, old newspaper headlines, the truth waiting like a shadow. He knew he had to tell her soon. The next day, Haley showed up early at the Cove, humming to herself as she sketched the pier from memory. She drew the ocean, the moonlight, his eyes. Her world had shifted. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Then her phone buzzed. A message from a number she didn't recognize. "Do you know who Liam Bennett really is?" She frowned, confused. What? Attached was a link. Against her better judgment, she tapped it. A headline appeared: CEO Liam Bennett resigns after corporate scandal, millions lost. Truth unclear. Haley's breath hitched. She read the article twice, 3 times. The words blurred: corporate fraud, betrayal, disgraced businessman. Her stomach twisted. It didn't sound like the man she knew. But the photos. It was him. Liam Bennett. She didn't show up at the Cove that day. Or the next. Liam waited both times, checking the clock, telling himself she was just busy. But by the 3rd day, the truth settled heavy in his chest. She knew. He found her in the park, the same one where she'd cried weeks before. She was sitting on the same bench, sketchbook open but untouched. "Haley," he said softly. She didn't look up. "I read about you," he swallowed. "I figured. Is it true?" She asked quietly. "Any of it?" He took a deep breath. "Some. But not the way they made it sound." "Then tell me," she said, finally meeting his eyes, pain flickering in hers. "Tell me who you really are." He sat beside her, hands clasped, rain threatening above. "I was a CEO. I ran a company that got caught in a fraud scandal. I didn't know what was happening, and not until it was too late. I took the blame to protect the people working under me, trying to find deceit, but all she saw was exhaustion." "You gave up everything for them." He nodded. "And maybe part of myself too." Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncertain. The first drops of rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder. Haley stood abruptly. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to see Maeve, not the headlines," he said, voice breaking. "I wanted one person to look at me and not see a story. But a man trying to start over." Tears blurred her vision. "I did see you, Liam. That's why it hurts." He reached for her, but she stepped back. "Haley, please." She shook her head, rain soaking her hair. "I need time." She turned and walked away, and this time, he didn't follow. Liam stood there as the storm broke, a cold, relentless, familiar. The same rain that had brought them together now fell like a curtain between them. When she reached the edge of the park, she turned once more. He was still there, motionless, head bowed. For a moment, she wanted to run back, to forgive, to understand. But the ache in her chest told her it wasn't that simple. Love had found them in the rain. But I trust, would have to find them again. The rain didn't stop for days. It poured as if the sky itself mourned what had been lost between them. Haley stayed inside her small motel room. curtains drawn, sketchbook untouched. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face soaked, broken, waiting. She wanted to hate him, wanted the betrayal to be simple, but love never was. Liam, meanwhile, spent those same days walking the city in silence. He'd return to Harper's books and brews more times than he'd admit, sitting at their table, tracing circles on the wooden surface where her coffee cup had once rested. He didn't blame her for leaving. He would have done the same. But still, hope lingered, a fragile and stubborn whispering that maybe, just maybe, fate hadn't finished what it started. Haley finally left her room one morning when the rain paused. The city glistened, streets reflecting the pale dawn. She walked aimlessly, hands deep in her coat pockets, thoughts heavier than the clouds above. She passed a newspaper stand, and something caught her eye, a small column tucked away at the corner of the front page. Former CEO Liam Bennett clears his name, internal audit. Reveals he took the fall for fraud committed by board members. Her breath caught. She read it again, slower. The article explained how an investigation had proven Liam's innocence, how he'd sacrificed his career to protect others. Her vision blurred with tears. For a long moment, she just stood there trembling. Then, she turned and started running. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to find him. When she reached the cough, she was breathless, rain starting again in thin, silvery sheets. She pushed open the door, scanning every corner. Empty. Are you looking for someone? The barista asked gently. Liam, she gasped. Has he been here? The woman smiled softly. He was. Left about 10 minutes ago. Said he was heading to the park. Haley's heart pounded. Of course, the park. The place where it all began. She ran through the rain, hair plastered to her face, shoes splashing through puddles. The city blurred, but she didn't stop. When she reached the park, she saw him sitting on their bench, head bowed, coat soaked through. Liam. She called out, voice breaking. He turned, disbelief flickering across his face as he stood. Haley. She was crying before she even reached him. You idiot, she choked out, half laughing, half sobbing. Why didn't you tell me the truth? I tried, he said softly, stepping closer. But I thought you deserved someone clean. Someone not carrying what I carried. She shook her head, tears and rain mixing on her cheeks. You carried it because you cared. Because you protected people who didn't deserve you. He hesitated. You believe me. Haley nodded. I always did. I was just scared too. Something inside him finally gave way. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as though letting go would break the world. She buried her face against his chest, sobbing into the fabric that smelled like rain and forgiveness. Neither spoke for a while, only the sound of the storm filled the silence. Then, Haley whispered, "You found me crying in the rain once. Guess it's my turn to find you." He laughed softly through the tears he didn't hide anymore. I guess fate likes symmetry. They stood there as the storm raged around them, two souls soaked but unafraid this time. When the rain finally began to fade, Liam took her hand. You once asked what happens when the rain stops for good, he said. She smiled faintly. I remember. Well, he whispered, brushing her wet hair back. Now we learn to dance without it. She laughed, and he pulled her closer, spinning her gently in the puddles. They moved clumsily, laughing between kisses. The city shimmering like it had been reborn just for them. The rain, once a symbol of pain, now washed everything clean, the lies, the fear, the distance. As the clouds broke and the first rays of sunlight filtered through, Haley whispered against his chest, "You changed everything with your words that night." "And you," he murmured, "changed everything with your heart." The park was quiet. Again, only the sound of dripping leaves and distant traffic. But somewhere in that stillness, the world felt right, as if love itself had waited for the storm to pass just so it could begin again. Months later, the cove would hang a photo on its wall, a candid shot of two people laughing under an umbrella, rain pouring all around them. No names, no captions. Just a reminder that sometimes the kindest strangers become the greatest miracles. And on the back of that photo, written in Haley's neat handwriting, were 5 simple words that told their whole story. He found me in the rain.